So what you're telling me is the person responsible for the product roadmap, feature prioritization, and customer outcomes, they should not be in the room when pricing is discussed.
Yeah, look, most product managers lack financial literacy. They don't understand the world of finance.
But that is a symptom. That's not a diagnosis. Like if the product manager cannot do pricing research, then you hired a backlog administrator. You hired a Jira admin. Oh, I said Jira.
Yeah, I agree. But of course, now you have trust problems.
Hey. I don't need this abuse. I got plenty of people waiting to abuse me. Welcome back to Arguing Agile. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm your host, Product Manager Brian Orlando. This is my co-host, Enterprise Business Agility Consultant, Mr. Om Patel. And as we know, the Exile on Main Street. That's 1,000 years ago. If you're looking to help the podcast, and if you enjoy our content, like the podcast and subscribe to it on YouTube and on all the audio platforms and wherever toys are sold. Today, we're talking about product managers and pricing. And what you're going to learn about product managers and pricing is how to diagnose whether pricing authority belongs to the product management in your organization or not. You're going to learn that real quick. And also how to build the case for the PMs owning pricing. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about the organizational dysfunction that leads to PMs not being trusted with pricing. And maybe we'll talk about frameworks and whatnot along the way.
Well, let's just go for it.
All right. And to kick us off, pricing determines which customers you serve, which problems you solve, and which competitors are in your landscape, or in your rearview mirror, or I guess in your windshield.
In your living room?
Yeah, up in your business?
Yeah.
Sales executes the strategy. Product management defines the strategy. That's the way it works when we're all happy together. But there's a 2016 book called Monetizing Innovation. And there's a number in that book that says 80% of companies set pricing based on costs or competitor benchmarking rather than on actual customer value research.
Yeah, I think the one industry that might kind of be out there, outside of the bell curve, so to speak, would be probably like jewelry, right? Nobody prices jewelry based on market, etc. It's what the market will bear. So if the market will bear a higher price, so be it. But we're not talking about that. Most product managers aren't in that space. Right. But there are business domains where what we're going to talk about today is kind of topsy-turvy, to say the least.
So let me, right away in the podcast, let me jump straight into the Steelman.
We need a Steelman icon.
I don't have a graphic. Maybe in the post I'll add a graphic. For the Steelman of the category we're talking about now, which is pricing is product strategy, not a sales tactic. There are two things to point out. Sales owns the customer relationships in a lot of companies, right? That's just the way it is, Like, that's not to dump Tupac on you this early in the podcast, but that's just the way it is. Some things are never going to change in these organizations. Sales needs every lever and pulley and wheel and dial or whatever for negotiation tactics that they can leverage to get the sale. There's plenty of people out there that will say, if we're not selling, we basically don't have a business, and then everything collapses. So this is a strong one.
Off at that point.
The other side of that is finance owns the revenue model and the margin requirements, and they're the ones coming down and saying, like, you have to have 60% profitability or 70% profit, whatever it is. Like in the AI world, everyone is like scraping 60% from the bottom of the barrel over here with their unbridled token use.
Yes, exactly what it is. All the burnt bits are left.
So those are the two things. Like finance has got numbers, and they're just like drawing the line in the sand. There's no budging there. And then on the other side, like sales is pulling all the wheels and levers and dials or whatever. So like, how can you ever set any kind of thing based on research when they get to do whatever they want? You know that, and it sounds crazy to say, but my experience tells me most companies are like that.
They are. So the poor product manager basically has their hand tied behind their back, tied in a sack and chucked into the deep Pacific. So how do you get out of this, right? I mean, this is the rest of this podcast. But two things I want to say here as far as the Steelman. So finance have their guidance for what it takes to stay above water. They're going to invest a certain amount of funding over a period of time, and they will figure out what needs to be done in terms of how much money needs to be made for this product to be quote unquote successful. Yes. And what that looks like in practice would be things like, what's the net present value of this thing, considering, let's say, a time period of 3-5 years, whatever your product is. Things are liable to change. The competitive landscape changes. New technologies come out, new competitors come out. You can't just say a year before today, here's our target, and we're going to just go after that blindly. Yep. You have to keep your eyes peeled left and right to see what's going on. But finance doesn't do that. typically. A product manager who has awareness of these kinds of financial ratios, they have their finger on the pulse, first of all, right? Because they own the product. But they also know the segmentation that exists in your market.
Right.
Based on that, your margins could differ. Probably should if you have multiple segments, right? So the product manager, I would argue, is ideally positioned to deliver to the guidelines that finance has dictated. Occasionally, you will find that if it's a product that is groundbreaking, that there is no competition for it. This is just an innovation. You're the first one on the market with it. There's nothing to go on. Then finance is not going to have that. All they're going to have is just simply a return on investment or return on capital employed, those kinds of ratios, right? So there are these factors to consider. Now, I started talking about you being like new to the market with a new product. So let's just take that to the other extreme, right? Mm-hmm. You're an innovator. You came up with an idea. You don't have a product yet, but you need some seed round funding. So you secure some funding from a VC. What are they going to do? I mean, they're putting money into the picture here. Right? And so what ratios are they using over what timeline? Yeah. In practice, honestly, most VCs will just use analogous projects or products that they've financed before and say, this amount of money over this period of time should net roughly between X and Y. You don't even have your market defined yet. So how do you navigate these choppy waters? A savvy product manager could define the path in this situation based on the segments that they're targeting.
Yeah.
But they have to have financial wherewithal.
What I think I heard was product managers conduct the research and they make their pricing decisions based on positioning and customer research and customer selection. Like maybe competitor analysis is involved in this, but like I always heard in pricing, there's a principle that you want to be close to your competitor. Like you never want to be real underneath your competitors. You want to be close to them or way above them because then you can position yourself as a luxury brand. But the point is like your pricing and your marketing then merge together to become this special thing. So it's like it's positioning that your product positioning goes along with your pricing in that instance. And again, I don't know, maybe your salespeople can do that and maybe they have the marketing talent to do that as well. But you're basically your product. It strikes me in what I just said. That strikes me as product delegating this market research and pricing and all that kind of stuff off to sales, not the other way around. It's like product's got to beg to be involved in that kind of thing.
I don't think it has to be binary like that. I think sales and product can work together, and the pricing strategy will vary per product or at least per product line. So yeah, I agree that you want to be on the radar when it comes to your competitors, but not always. You could be feature driven to a certain degree. If you have an edge on the market with things that you're bringing up in your product that no one else has, maybe you can have a bit of a premium differential on your pricing. But it depends, right? I mean, product alone will not be able to do this, and sales alone will not be able to do this.
You have a story from your career where the pricing authority sat outside of product, and then what was the outcome? What happened in that instance? Because it's been literally every company I've ever been at. The last couple companies that I've been at, it's been more of at least a discussion that they know that product should at least be in the room, if not heavily influential in this conversation. And they know when they're doing it without product that they know they're missing out by not having product actively involved in doing it. Because at a lot of those companies, product is like, I'm not going to say it's an afterthought. That's not really the right way to say it. A product is, they don't think of product in that way. You know, they think of product as like somebody that talks to development teams and translates rather than like the product manager, thinking of the product manager as a GM and then all the employees, even though they don't work under the hierarchical structure of the product manager, they work for the product manager, meaning the product manager is running that whole segment of the business. And a lot of companies are resisting coming around to that model Marty Kagan talks about mostly. Like a lot of companies are resisting going to that. This is not a great like war story. Every company I've been at has been that way. I would say like the smaller companies, they get it. They get it. The larger companies, oh boy, if you're even invited to the table, like good on you if you're even invited.
So I'll tell you what I've seen in my experience. When you are invited as a product person to these discussions, it isn't from the standpoint of a holistic pricing kind of discussion. It's from the standpoint of, well, you're closer to the development team, so give us the cost side of the equation, right? So we'll decide, sales will decide to slap on a margin that we think is appropriate, and you just give us what's it going to take for us to deliver this.
Is that the sales to product equivalent of the project manager going like, I'm just going to put my thumb in the air and say it's going to take you 3 weeks, and then hopefully that's the same thing.
Much the same thing, honestly. Yeah. I mean, sadly, it's so closer to reality with this kind of analogy, because sales should at least know that there are different segments of the market.
Right.
With the product manager, there's only one date that they come up with. But yeah, so if you are invited, it's only to provide the cost side of the equation, and which is a shame, because you should be able to say, here are the different strata of our customers, and based on what their needs are, etc., we can price differentially across those.
I think we're coming to some solid takeaways here in this category. If you're a product manager and you can't explain why the pricing is what the pricing is, like, well, I hate to be the one to step into my office, close the door, because you're not the product manager. You're the feature factory foreman.
Yes.
Listen, don't yell at me. I didn't say it. Like, Marty Kagan was the one that's saying that you're in a feature factory. Like, lots of those other people who had the Melissa Perry is a feature factory, right? She's escaping the build trap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, go yell at them. I know you're not going to yell at Melissa Perry. Don't yell. I'm just telling you. Like, you should be in the room where it happens. Another Hamilton on the Arguing Agile podcast. Thank you very much. Some takeaways. I got some takeaways that I've kind of sketched out on the back of a pizza box while we were talking. Map your current pricing flow. It requires you to do a little organizational mapping in your organization, a little flow documentation that says who conducts your current willingness to pay research, your pricing research. What will customers bear? What will they not bear? What are your competitors' pricing? That kind of stuff. And then who takes that research and does something with it? Who consumes that research and does something with it? Because somebody has to produce a pricing model. Somebody comes out with like, this tier is this much money and this tier is this much money. Who is that person?
Yep.
Or people, I guess, maybe if it's a group. And then who has the authority to change it? Maybe the authority to change it's not the same person. Or maybe it all comes from one executive who does, just figure out who does the research, who makes the proposals, who's involved in the discussion, and just figuring that out will help you take the next step, whatever the next step might be.
Yeah, map out the landscape of what this looks like, first of all. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good starting position for you. But if you're a product person, you could do worse than just learn a little bit about these financial ratios, because they will always help you in the future.
Yeah. And also, if you found this argument useful, or if there's something that we missed we didn't talk about, or if you've been screaming at your TV, 5.5% of people that watch this podcast on YouTube, they watch it on a TV. So there potentially are people screaming at us on a TV somewhere. Okay. So if you're screaming at us on a TV, I don't know how you're going to add comments on a TV, but add some comments and let us know what stuck out to you in this conversation, because we're done.
Yeah. And don't forget, like and subscribe.
Okay. So for the next category, hey, why don't PMs do pricing? Because they don't have the skill. Like, you already started the podcast saying they don't have financial literacy. So if your product manager can't calculate customer lifetime value, maybe they really shouldn't own pricing. Like, the role requires financial literacy. If they've never managed a P&L before,
right,
maybe you don't want them learning on your dime. I mean, like, there might be some legitimacy here. Product Management Institute survey 2022. It says 67% of product managers report no formal training in pricing methodology or financial methodologies or financial modeling, right?
2/3 of all product managers don't have these essential skills. I'd say it's a problem. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons why product as a discipline isn't really getting as much traction.
Well, it's also the PMI that did the study. So I kind of like a Product Management Institute did a study in 2022 and said everybody that we surveyed that was all product managers turned XYZ said that they didn't care about financials, which now that you frame it that way, like, that doesn't strike me as odd at all.
This is surprising because there's so many previously named as project managers are now product managers, but project management teaches you about project financing.
I understand what you're saying, but also, like, there's a lot of project managers out there that their only job is to stand over your shoulder, tapping the ruler.
When's it done?
That's right.
When's it going to be done?
That's right.
I get
All right. The Steelman here is super easy. Pricing requires financial modeling, and that's beyond the training of a typical PM. Like if we're saying that 80% of PMs out there, that's the number we just made up, by the way, are backlog admins, that style of PM. How are we going to try to institute this at a large scale? You even said earlier, like, well, you got to talk to sales.
You do. Yeah, because sales presumably has on their radar what other competitors are charging, etc. Right. And you should have some idea who they are, but you may not be privy to their financial models necessarily. But sales should be.
And not to undercut myself, what like financial skills, like just like any skill, just like HR. Oh, I got to learn how to interview people. I got to learn how to have a conversation to make sure people are meeting our expected level of performance. Like these things they're all learnable. Financial literacy, learnable. However, I was at a company one time that was acquired, and after the acquisition, they took away financial responsibilities from the managers in the organization. Now, I was more a product owner in that organization, which is like some responsibilities of product manager were like divorced and put on managers. It wasn't exactly the perfect atmosphere for this. What is, right? But it's a great example. When the private equity folks took over, not only did they not train, but they made financials more obscured because they took them away from the managers now. Whereas before, I had full visibility of the financials. So I would say like companies are all over the map here. It's going to be very difficult to do this. I understand that's what we're lobbying for is like PMs should be doing the pricing. It is a product function. However, it's so messed up in 80% plus. It's probably more than that of companies that I don't know if we're going to get back to a place of balance.
There's hope, right?
Well, we can't end the podcast this early.
That's right. So with companies that are acquiring other companies, acquirers or holding companies like that are notorious for keeping all of these financial type decisions centralized into a separate area, typically at the corporate level.
An area with no product managers.
Exactly, right. Yes, divorced away from product managers. Small companies.
Insanity.
Yes, of course. Most small companies, though, they don't have the hierarchical burden, right? So I think in that environment, the product manager has a bit more autonomy to work with finance, sales, etc., because they're reachable, right? Yep. With a holding company or anything like that, yeah, good luck with that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a solid takeaway here is if your company is a size where these folks are approachable, then you're not beyond saving.
You should take the onus, right, on yourself to go learn some of this stuff and reach out to your peers.
And I will tell you personally, this is how I learned it. I learned it by reaching out to C-level folks who set basically at the different companies. I basically learned it mostly when I was on the period of my career when I did contracting product management. And when I would work with the C-suite, I would talk pricing with them. How did you get to this number? What is the lifetime value? How did you calculate it? And basically inserted myself into the middle of pricing discussions, and that's how it happened. But I did that because it was small companies, and at small companies, usually people are just happy that anyone's even interested in these things that they're doing in addition to their normal job responsibilities. And they're just happy to talk about them, even if they're not just happy to talk about them because they're happy that other people are interested in these things that they've just been kind of silently, quietly doing when nobody is looking, to get a second opinion.
Validation. Yeah, exactly.
The best people that I work with, they invite this kind of scrutiny because they're looking to learn, to be like, oh, I didn't consider that, or maybe you see something I didn't see. But
what you're saying talks directly to the culture of the company, regardless of size. Because some small size companies also don't work this way. It depends on the corporate culture.
Yep.
But yes, I agree. I think if you're a C-level person who is basically coming up with these things, it behooves you to get some validation at least.
Yeah. But take a step back home. It's story time. So I worked at a place one time where a small company, very tiny little small company, usually the founders will set the pricing, right? Like nobody else is like, they don't know enough. Usually the founder is the subject matter expert, right? They set the pricing. And over time, as customers grow, as you deviate a little bit from your ICP and you go to a broader audience, your offering goes out to people who aren't exactly in your ideal customer profile or ideal customer persona. And then your pricing might change. So you say, well, I want to go over here and sell to big enterprise clients, or I want to go over here and sell B2C. Another place I was at, we were B2B software, but it was really B2B2C software. Like the purchasers and the customers were not the same, right? And then we got into the B2C market, where we sold mobile applications directly to consumers. And then there was a pricing conversation there to be like, well, do we do a subscription? Do we do a one-time fee in the store? Because some apps you just one-time fee. It's a good amount of money. And then whatever other apps you buy service, but then the conversion rate for service versus the people actually willing to just buy an app is like very low. Some apps in the app store, you buy them and then they have a cycle. Like they're only up there for like 18 months, 2 years, and then they go away and they come out with their new version. You have to re-buy the new version, which really like causes some friction. And almost every time I've gone through this, it's usually the person that set the initial pricing. They're the one that everyone in the company looks to,
right,
to go back and do the pricing again. And because the founder of the company set the pricing when the company was like 8 people or whatever, and now the company's 500 people, like that person that founder who is still with the company magically somehow, everyone's looking to them to set the pricing. And they're doing a bunch of other stuff. They're running the whole business. They have hundreds of employees. They're doing hiring. They're doing firing. They're doing budgeting. They probably answer to some financial person somewhere else if there's PE involved or whatever. And they should not be the single point of failure here doing the pricing anymore, because they can't dedicate the research time anymore. Basically, they're doing too much is what I'm saying. They're doing too much. They need to delegate that pricing, research, conversation. I'm not saying the person that does that stuff shouldn't answer to this person and tick all the boxes, answer all the questions, right, and not be informed. That's not what I'm saying. They should do that, and if they can't figure it out, then you should get a panel of people, or the right person, or maybe the person you got in the job is not the right person. But I'm not like going back and having that original founder who now is like super strapped down with other activities because the business has grown. That's not the right thing to do.
Absolutely. That founder, like, in addition to doing 1,000 other things now, because they're now growing,
right,
they're not doing what they need to do, which is that research that can inform the pricing decisions. They're not doing that. So they're basically going on gut feel, yesteryear's stuff that they say, oh, this is how we used to price it. We should probably just do that. Yeah, just adding the cost of inflation. That's not always the best way to go.
Yeah.
You need extra pair of eyes to look at this stuff. And those other people with those extra pairs of eyes can do the research. You don't have to be the one doing it. So it's twofold, right? If you're a product person in an organization like that, expect this to happen, first of all. And when it happens, be the first one to put your hand up. Go learn those financial things that you don't know about. And then try and ask for the owner to let go of some of those things and trust you. If you're one of these owner type people, let go at some point, right? I mean, you can't do it all forever.
I think you just hit a whole different podcast right there that we got to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the growing a business, like when to let go, that kind of stuff. If your product managers can't do pricing because of different reasons, no time, someone won't let go, they lack skill or whatever, it may or may not be your hiring bar that you're like, oh, we got to raise the bar or whatever. It may not be just that alone. It may be a bunch of other factors. So again, that flow, earlier in the podcast where we talked about that flow diagram of like who does what, by when, who discusses it, who makes the final decision. You got to have all that written down somewhere. You got to have these processes written down somewhere.
It doesn't have to be like very elaborate, right?
No,
you could do just like what I call a force field diagram. Just write down who does what, put people's names in little bubbles, and just put arrows and say this person does this. I mean, believe me, that one picture worth its weight in gold.
Although I could totally pin somebody down in this discussion and demand, no, I want to know who in your business, if I was running the business, and I would say, look, I'm like Brian and Ohm Software Development Company. We started it as Brian and Ohm Software Development Company. Ohm just screamed at me, keep develop more, faster. But in German, I don't know why he was speaking German, because he lives in Berlin land. That's why.
Yeah, well.
Was that Spanish? That's a callback to episode 1 right there. That's you guys. That
was a long time ago.
That's a lot of salt in that dump truck. That's a salt mine over here. Every business process is like that, though. Mm-hmm. It's like who does what, but by when, like that old kind of thing is like who is responsible for what decision, who's responsible for carrying out what business process. Like, if you're not writing this stuff down, where does it live? I mean, it lives all in your founder's head. Okay, well, how does it live in your founder's head when there's 500 people in the organization? 1,000 people? We kind of already segued into the takeaway. You already have your map of who does what, deciding for your pricing and whatnot. So maybe you can add to that on top of this. Well, what research have they done? Like, do they understand the value-based versus competitive versus cost-based? Can they explain the difference between cost plus, value-based, competitive pricing, all the different types of pricing?
Yep.
And then let's write down the research that they did for pricing, and show us that. Bring that research back to the group. I'm hoping one person is not just deciding on pricing in the dark by themselves.
Listen, it doesn't sound silly to me because in practice,
that's how it happens.
That's how it happens.
Yes.
And the flip side of that, most people just simply take that. Well, so-and-so said that must be true. Feel free to challenge these pricing decisions and start with the basics, right? Yeah. What you're not doing here is simply knocking down somebody else. What you're doing is trying to get validation on what's happening here, right?
I don't know if we came away in this category clean. So I got in this category was like skills are 50% of it. Like you need the skills to do it. If you're a PM, you don't have the skills, you can't do it. But also your organizational design matters. Yes. So if the PMs are not ever invited into the room where it happens, it's for you, Lauren. It's 2 podcasts. I did that for you, Lauren. Then you're never going to get the results you're looking for. So I don't feel like we made it. Like we had our Steelman, we had our points. We still didn't get a good takeaway out of this one. I'm going to throw it over to the audience. Do you have good experience with this one, or are you like me, where you're like, most people are just going to like pricing? Oh, the adults will take that one, Brian. Get on out of here.
That's somebody else's decision. Do let us know in the comments down below.
All right. The next section. I know what I want to talk about. When executives refuse to delegate pricing authority. When that founder who was with the company when they were tiny and small, and is still with the company, and they set the original pricing, and they refused to give up pricing authority. Throw Cartman back up on the screen. Authority to the product managers, because this new fandangled product management, like this trend's gonna blow over. Yeah, Gary from sales is what we're talking about now. They're like, that's a signal that you either you've hired incompetent product managers, like that's definitely one signal, sure, maybe, or you've got people that can't relinquish control. I mean, that's the other side of it, right? Like if we're going for extremes, if we're only showing barbell graphs right now,
I think you can attribute this to both sides. I mean, if you've made bad hiring decisions, then it kind of feeds into the lack of trust because people can't do the job. But you hired them, you're not going to entrust them with pricing decisions. So where does this go in the long picture?
I'll tell you where it goes. It goes to Marty Kagan's Empowered. That's right. And Marty Kagan's Empowered 2020. I think he wrote Empowered in 2020. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to check that reference when the podcast is over. I won't. Let's be honest. He says organizations that centralize pricing decisions in executive or finance functions typically operate as feature factories. That's what he says in his book. I didn't make that up. I could completely make up Marty Kagan quotes. Actually, that should be a whole podcast we do, is made up Marty Kagan quotes.
That sounds like a fun one.
Sounds like a fun one,
yeah. Oh, my goodness.
But I don't think this is fake.
Yeah. The people that are closest to those decisions and are refusing to let go, they're going to propagate this environment.
Well, I'm going to start right away with the Steelman.
Let's go.
Hit my music. Steelman. That's right. Listen, pricing affects company valuation and investor relations. Like pricing is too critical of a business function to be delegated to any one product manager. Sorry, you looked at me and you knew in my brain I was
exactly
like, but also like that ruinous empathy right there. That's right. I'm lifting that term from the last podcast. Like that is what the executives are thinking. Is like, oh, who's this guy? I'm not giving him that like lack of empathy right there. That I saw in your eyes. I saw a flash in your eyes right there.
It was right there.
That's what the executives are thinking. They're like, who is this kid? This product management kid with 20 years of software experience. Like, I went to Harvard. How dare he? That's what they're thinking, is it's too important of a business function. I should do it because I'm big and important. But that's what they're thinking. If I'm not going to be a jerk for once. The other side of this is executive experience provides market perspective that the PMs lack. They haven't been in my market long enough. Maybe I'm a sales executive, right? Maybe I'm a 20-year sales executive, and this PM came from like logistics or whatever, and we work in healthcare tech or whatever. You don't know anything about health. I know about pricing in health tech, and you're not qualified. That would be the trade-off here.
I understand that. I think that has some legitimacy, right? Because people that you just hired from the domain that you've had a long stay experience in, but that's fine. That does not mean it needs to be binary though still. I would still maintain all that's saying is, by all means go in, but invite someone else to examine what your basis is, right? Your assumptions, and say, this is how I'm arriving at this pricing conclusion. What do you think?
We talked about the Steelman of like, well, the executives, like they have the experience and the product managers don't. And, they think that it's super important because it affects company valuation, and product managers don't sit at that level. And that's where their bonuses, like the executives and like VPs and stuff, that's where their bonuses and stuff are. So it's like, It's too important to them personally. And boy, they won't delegate that stuff. That's the slippery slope. That's like the gently rolling Irish countryside of moss-covered stones that are always wet because it's always raining or misty out, where they won't delegate that stuff, and then they just slip into like, well, now we won't delegate all this other stuff as well, which includes product strategy and what features you build next and all kinds of stuff that has to do with, basically, you're not even doing product management.
Now you put your product management in a sack, tie their hands behind their back, and chuck them into the Atlantic or Pacific, whatever.
Well, you just built the weapon, and now you're using it for everything. We can't let the product managers be involved with prioritization of what features to build, or if you're doing like OKRs, what problems to solve in what order. The more of this that we're talking about, the more it's pushing into a feature factory of this overly burdensome executive that believes they know better than people doing research, people doing like the trial and error of figuring out business, Yeah,
I think the takeaway would be probably twofold. If you're an executive like this, sooner or later, you're going to find out. Yeah. Sooner or later, right? And if you've been in the game long enough, you probably did that and bounced somewhere else.
Do you have a story of a overly burdensome executive that ended up being wrong? Sorry, I have one. I certainly have one.
Well, let's go and lead off with yours.
When I was in logistics, what the company would do is the company would hire these trucking executives in these nebulous positions of like, so a VP of strategic initiatives, right? And the strategic initiative basically was, we want to sell our software to your former company that used to be a hotshot director or whatever at. So they would hire them in. I mean, government does the same thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, government does the same thing. I mean, there's plenty of industries that do the same thing. And they would do that, and these executives would come on, and they would basically, like, with no broader context, just their anecdotal evidence from the company, that the one single company they worked at previously, would say, oh, everybody wants XYZ feature. Everyone wants feature X.
Let's go build it now.
Feature Z. We've absolutely got to build feature Z. And because they're a high-level executive, the more they push, the more, the director of development or whoever, people that are looking for promotions themselves, let's just make this person happy. Let's just, I know there's not bringing evidence. They don't really know how to do research. So let's just make this person happy. They would get these people, and they would last maybe somewhere between 12 and 20 months and really not contribute much. It'd take a lot of the development team's time, and then eventually wash out because they couldn't sell their company. They couldn't come out with any meaningful features because, again, I understand what the company was doing. They basically were hiring, like, they should have just called this person the VP of business development, because that's what they were trying to do. They're trying to expand our business into this particular firm they couldn't break through. But they should have never given that person authority to like greenlight features and all that kind of stuff. That stuff should have been gated off to a product manager to say, hey, what kind of bets do you want to do you want to try to put on the table, Mr. and Mrs. VP of strategic, special, grand poobah initiatives or whatever you are? Because the product manager would come back, and when they get grilled, they can say, I took this bet because your new strategic VP assured me that XYZ was definitely used by the company. The early prototypes, the people or whatever that they referred me to said they were going to use it, and then it never panned out. Sitting in front of all the executives and department heads, they're going to ask, how come it didn't pan out? And then there will come a point where you have to decide if you're going to tell the truth or if you're going to try to just quietly swallow it and move on.
Keep updating that resume.
I'm going to give them the facts and the evidence and just lay it out and be like,
they need to hear it.
Yes.
So I agree with that.
And I bring that story up. This is my real story about pricing and about greenlighting features, and it was sort of like parallel to pricing, to tell you that these folks were a dime a dozen in that. I stayed in that company for over a decade, and these folks came and went like clockwork.
I think that's not just limited to that industry either, right? I've
I've
seen that in bespoke software for vertical industries.
And it's definitely the way things happen in government.
Sadly.
So organizations that won't let product managers set prices have already decided product managers don't do product management. That's basically what we're saying on this podcast.
Right.
Scary, hard to hear for a lot of people, but that it is what it is. So diagnose your organization's pricing authority structure, which we already outlined earlier on the podcast. Who has final approval? Who is involved in the discussion? And also, a funny thing, Arguing Agile 201, it could be helpful in this podcast because the people that have say in the pricing, even from the outside, you could be mapping that stakeholder quad, the 2x2, high interest, low power.
Yeah. You're a stakeholder at that point, right? In that quadrant.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then does that structure, whatever that structure is that you map out, does that map your feature prioritization? Because if it doesn't, you've got a
huge disconnect.
You've got some disconnect.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you found this useful, give us a like, subscribe on the podcast. Let us know that this was useful. The next logical step that we're going to jump to is a debate on how to structure pricing, assuming that you want PM's own pricing, which we do. How do you structure that discussion? How do you structure that collaboration between sales, finance, your executive, all that kind of stuff? How do you actually do it? We're talking about a pricing collaboration model that may work. I'm not going to say it actually 100% works.
No.
May work.
Let's get to it.
We're going to start by reiterating product management should own the pricing strategy and the research for that pricing strategy. Okay. Sales owns negotiation within defined boundaries. Finance owns margin requirements, revenue forecasting, things like that, right? And then all these boundaries, if they're not clearly defined, which most companies are not at all, which we touched early in the podcast, now you have chaos.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, if none of them are defined, you're in the jungle now.
If you have clear pricing authority boundaries, those categories I just pointed out, you will deliver faster time to market. Your pricing changes will be able to respond more quickly. And because of that, you'll make more money.
Yeah, so the boundaries, I just want to be clear about the message here. We're saying that the boundaries should be clearly defined, but that doesn't mean that they should be rigid. You need to be able to reach across the boundary and speak to the other person in a collaborative manner. For example, finance could lay out the guidance for margin. It's usually a range. Sales would have the authority to swing somewhere in there, but potentially they could sell a system at cost. If it's the big customer, this is your entry product with that customer, etc., because there's a big upside to it. There are many, many reasons why sales would change the actual price that is charged to the customer, but it's an informed decision. It isn't just simply, a random kind of decision that sales made by themselves or finance dictated onto sales or anything like that. Collaboratively, they arrive at a range that would be pitched, but the actual pitch, the actual number would vary based on what sales decide. So you could lose some money upfront, maybe. I've seen that happen in software sales. And then the money's made up afterwards. Or you make very little margin on the price of the software, but you make margin on recurring revenue on support.
Well,
right?
you're already in the Steelman side of the discussion here, which is pricing requires cross-functional consensus. Okay, period, yeah. Right? Requires cross-functional, and I'm not debating any. First of all, this is the best Steelman section that we've ever done on these two podcasts for you. because I'm not debating either of these. As pricing requires cross-functional consensus, number one. Number two, sales needs flexibility to close deals. Okay, look, Steelman is
steal away.
Your Steelman is stolen. He's stolen. I put him in my pocket. I agree with all that. However, if you're going to say consensus models create paralysis, and you're going to say well, if it's everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's. If that's what you're going to say, then I have a big problem with that. You're not Steelmanning at that point. Now you're introducing a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be introduced into this. You want to set a new pricing model. You want to change the price. You get all the folks in the room that are contributing to this sales and pricing discussion, and we discuss it and we move forward. That doesn't need to be 47 people. Okay, that pricing requires cross-functional consensus. It could be the sales person, the chief executive, and the product manager. Could be the Holy Trinity. I can pull those three people together instantly, basically. So if you're saying well, that's going to create analysis paralysis and there's a diffusion of accountability, I will say completely untrue. Once you make that coalition understands that pricing and pricing structure is a super important thing, just as important as anything else. And we will pull it together and self-organize to get it done. The other one is sales flexibility needs to be within the PM-defined guardrails. So I, as a product manager, like if you're saying, well, this customer won't buy unless I build these 5 features and then give them a discount by 95% and do whatever, I was like, that sounds like doesn't fall into our ideal customer profile, and hard pass. Okay.
Yes, I agree with you that it's really not it's not a viable approach. Let's say that. However, there are cases, you could say they're edge cases, but there are cases where sales will undercut what the price should be going into a customer, right? For a myriad of other reasons. Maybe this is the first of several products that the customer would buy from you.
Yes. I'm going to say yes and.
Yes and. Yes.
I'm going to say yes and.
First time today.
I'm going to say yes and the first time today, but yes and, but my and really is however. I can't have rogue sales folks. Like the sale, assuming that we've done our legwork, pricing is an execution of our product strategy. So I'm only willing to flex so far. If you're saying, well, Brian, I'll give them this for free and then we'll get in the door and then we'll do whatever. That's what all those trucking people that I was talking about before, that's what they were doing. Oh, we'll just give them everything for 50% discount for 2 years and eventually they'll love our stuff so much or whatever. That's what all these executives would do. So, and then we give it to them for reduced costs. They'd ask for a bunch of features we spend months with our development team working on to punch out the features, and then nobody will use the software. And then after 1 year, they don't renew. So now that executive has been here for about 20-ish months. About 20 months in, they don't renew, and the CEO just comes to this VP of special projects or whatever and says, like, look, we did a bunch of work for you. You spent this much in development budget, and your guys, they never used a product in the 12 months they were using it. You got no adoption. They obviously bought it with the minimum bare bones of what they could buy to be nice or whatever, and then didn't use it, showed no interest, and then skipped. So like why like those 9 months of development time, 6 months, 3 months, it is like why do in the time it took us to work on those things and sell this customer, yeah, we got a little revenue, but we could have worked on these other things that benefited all of our other customers. And then what comes is a very quiet dismissal of that individual, of the mutual parting of ways. I wish I could tell you how many times I have seen that exact thing go down. It goes down behind closed doors.
It does. I agree with what you say. It happens a lot. I do think that there are cases, not many, but there are cases where sales can sometimes radically undercut the price.
Sure.
Again, for reasons that need to be solid, that need to be shared with the product people as well, because pricing is just one factor in the product. It's not the only factor. An example of this. So you have a brand new product that you're building from the ground up. Nothing like that exists anywhere. Now you have a product that you would like to put into a customer's hands so that you can sell more of it, because no, it's not there. It's not out there at all. Yeah. And a salesperson could say, well, you're our first customer. We're going to get you on. We'll treat you with white gloves. And the cost of entry for you is X. And the next customer will pay 2X or 3X. Is that legitimate? I think it is, because it's really a barrier to entry that they're trying to overcome. There's limits, though, right? If they give away the farm, it's kind of like the case you just described where they don't renew. Well, somewhere in there needs to be a proper calibration of what they're doing. So this is not on the product manager. This is in product management. This is directly in sales, between sales and finance. We did this, but what happened? So the gamble that they're making there, right? They need to be very careful with that gamble.
I understand the picture you're painting. I would say that I don't agree. I think product management should be in the middle of this discussion. Here's the way I think about finance. Like, they're experts. I think they just set in the driver's test, they set the cones up. The fact that business comes in and knocks down certain cones or whatever, like, we're going to drive over these cones, a parallel park or a three-way, 3-point turn or whatever. We're going to drive over these and there's nothing you can do. Like, you can judge us, but there's nothing you can do. Again, this is the same as a CEO Or like the private equity firm that comes in and takes out a big loan. And is like, this is our loan now. We're going to pay it all back. And the finance people are like, how are we going to do this? Their job.
Is this the Instapot story?
It's basically there were financial people at Instapot that probably recommended we probably shouldn't do a special dividend of all of our cash. And then
every penny.
And then take out a loan for double, triple, whatever it was. Yeah, we probably shouldn't do that. And they're like, cool story, kid. And you know what? We're doing double because I want to get paid. That's like, put that cash in my hand. Again, like, this is the way that I look at the finance folks. It's like they're a risk indicator. Okay?
Yeah.
But they're not the ones that are telling you like, oh no, you can't spend this cash. You can't do this. That's the product manager. Because are they a product manager or are they the backlog admin? Because again, we're back at this main point. Right? Yeah. Are they the CEO of the product? I'm going to beat that dead horse. I'm going to bring it up every time I can. Or do they just manage the backlog when we need to have adult conversations?
They leave.
Yeah, get out.
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, yes, I agree. But I do think that there are cases where companies will undercut pricing to get into a market or get into a customer just on the promise of future revenue stream.
Listen, I'm 100% down.
So don't pan out.
Again, you convene that pricing group.
Yeah.
And you talk about, we're going to break our policy because of XYZ. And then we talk about the risks and then we make a decision and then we do it. No, that's absolutely
not. Room is your point. And I agree with that. Yeah. Sales can't just go out there and deal with customers or prospects, turn them into customers, come back and say, we've made a sale. By the way, we're not making money on this one, but
correct.
Like they can't do that by themselves. But that's how it happens quite often, right? It should be a collaboration is what we're saying. And I agree with that 100%.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, let's pivot to the next category. But before we pivot, I want to say launching your product without doing pricing research is product management malpractice. So get your lawyers. Lawyer up is what I'm saying. It's product management malpractice disguised as speed. Speed to market.
Speed to market.
Move fast and break the law. That's what I'm saying.
You're going to be taken to the cleaners. So lawyer up and lather up.
Yikes. Oh, lather up. I like it. It's a little saucy, but hey, I'm for it. Research provides data, but product managers must also know when to change prices post-launch. So when to change price, what signals do you need to monitor? That's interesting because of all the podcasts and everything I listen to, I don't ever hear anyone talking about this.
This is why you guys are here.
One person, I would say Daria, Tech But Make It Real, that channel on YouTube. Yeah. She talks about this. And a little bit of Elena Verna, she talks about a little bit pricing. But pricing is a product feature, and it requires iteration, just like any other product feature. And if you set pricing once and set it and forget it, then... Well, basically, you're doing the equivalent of ignoring feedback. That's what I'm saying right now. So what you should be looking at is the value delivered in your products. If you are measuring your value delivery every year, then you have some kind of percentage figure year over year, right? If you're working for those executives that I was talking about, special projects or whatever, where you add this feature because this one customer asked for it, and then nobody cares about it, nobody uses that feature.
Right.
If you're not measuring your feature adoption, also, you're going to have a hard time doing this. But if you're measuring your feature adoption and you see that your features are getting used and you're adding value, your outcomes, right, through your software, then you have a leg to stand on when it comes to price increases year over year. And if you're not growing your revenue and you have like static pricing, I feel as a product manager, there's going to be some uncomfortable conversations with your executives.
Behind closed doors.
Yeah.
I agree with this. So here's the thing though, right? How do you know what value your products are delivering? We can talk about that briefly. So you have features that are in your product.
Yes.
And they're out in
That's
a
whole different podcast. Right
yeah, we're not going to deep dive too much here, but you do need to figure out how much value you're delivering per feature over a unit of time, whether it's annually or quarterly, whatever it is. It's contextual, but if you're not sure about measuring those, you're probably not going to change your pricing because nothing's informing that price change.
Well,
or maybe inflation.
I would say probably a lot of companies do. I say if inflation is a certain percent, then we raise a certain percent. And that's probably the only way they're adding more. Or they just say we're going to sprinkle AI in
Pixie dust.
Yeah, and then pixie dust inflation into it. Anyway, like Daria has a great channel. Like, Tech About Make It Real is a great channel because she talks about the typical SaaS businesses versus AI businesses. Because the AI businesses with tokens, it's not a predictable amount of revenue you're going to bring in because your customers could blow you up with tokens.
Sure.
But the Steelman in this category, I'm going to try to make it quick. The Steelman in this category is frequent price increases. Like, it confuses customers, it confuses sales teams, it bothers customers, especially with AI products. It bothers customers. And then stability in your prices, it builds predictability and trust over time. Like, people know what they're going to get, they know how much it costs. You're all reliable, which I feel like that's a kind of a number one point is frequent price changes. And also I would sprinkle in, since I'm doing Salt Bay, so I'll also like sprinkle in that complex AI related, credit related stuff that changes all the time, like the curses of the world, like the AI vendors that have been changing their models left and right. That's
an example.
It enrages customers.
It enrages people. It's an example of what the market will bear. They're figuring it out. And we can make more money here.
Right.
So let's just change up the package size and the variations, right?
Yeah. And that versus price stability. I mean, that's really the Steelman. I mean, that's really the two things in this category that we're talking about. I will start immediately by saying, like, the market conditions move faster than your annual revenue cycles. So you're not like year to year repricing, not good enough anymore. Like 90-day window. I would want to be, if I had a pricing team that I could convene, right? Myself, CEO, CFO, maybe somebody else in the business. I don't know, marketing, CMO. I don't know who it would be. Yeah. 4 people talk about pricing. I would put every 90 days. I just drop a meeting on the calendar. If they didn't do it,
which they won't.
No, actually, the CMO probably would.
The CMO, if they're looking to squeeze more out of your product, they would.
But exactly, I would expect that they would. If their marketing initiatives are not squeezing, ring in us, more.
Bringing the sponge dry.
That's right. Get more.
The dry sponge.
Get liquid out of that lime. That's what I'm saying right now. I would expect it. So I would expect people are going to ask me. So I'm just going to proactively just put a 90-day review.
The product person is the right person to initiate this, I think, because when you're in this meeting, you have to bring in other factors. Like, who are still active players in the market for your product? Who are the competitors? Did we lose 1 or 2 of them? Did we gain new competitors?
What you just said is every 90 days, let's reevaluate the customer's value perception of our brand versus other brands to see if other brands have matured more in that period, or maybe there's new competitors that emerge on the market in that period and we're unaware because we are all super busy and important and we have yachts to attend to. I don't know.
Right. Golf games to play.
Do we have yachts?
We sold ours.
Why would we do such a thing? My kind of takeaway in this category is that static pricing in a dynamic market or an emerging market, right? That's just like a decision to leave money on the table.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
So if there's a takeaway in this category, which again, this was a very quick category. The Steelman in this category is pretty good. But if you're you need some kind of signal monitoring apparatus. That's why I said like 90 days. It could be different for your company. I don't know what market segment you're in. I would think like your wins and losses by price point, by customer. If all your customers are the same price point, maybe it doesn't matter.
Easy.
You need at your 90-day review, you need some metrics to go along with this. Discount frequency. If your sales team can give discounts, well, sales kind of needs the ability to
flexibility.
How often are they leveraging that? And then what's the trade-off? What is the steep discount?
What's the upside on all those things?
Feature adoption rates. If you got that sales guy, strategic VP, what are the adoption rates of that thing that they're saying? The customers love this one trick. Like, okay, but I'm going to measure you on this and then fire you on this or whatever every 20 months in my experience. Like a reassessment every 90 days, sitting down with your executive or with your pricing panel, whoever that panel is, right? Again, I had a bunch of C-level executives. Maybe it's not that for you. Maybe your org is really, really big and it's like one director. And then the other thing we didn't talk about is if a particular metric moves, you might want to reevaluate pricing, whatever that metric is. Maybe that metric is a certain number of customer growth above a certain number. If you have a services component to your products and services, if a certain number of hours or customers on board or whatever, basically what I'm saying is if you're taxing your services component of your business a lot, you might want to raise your prices like significantly to be like, hey, because I'm providing my services and I'm super stretched thin, I want less customers. So you need to make it more expensive on purpose.
Yeah, he talked about if the customer base grows, it also applies the other way, right? You have attrition, and you might want to reconsider maybe your price is too high, or you could just do trials, promotions, whatever else. The point I want to make here is the apparatus that you mentioned that monitors all of these different factors, the radar or radars, the monitoring happens all the time. That's not a 3-monthly thing where you get together and say, what happened in the last 3 months? The monitoring happens all the time, but the price adjustments don't happen all the time.
Sure.
So maybe quarterly, whatever cadence is right for you, have the meeting there, but you're bringing in all of that knowledge of what's changed into that meeting.
So we covered the case for the PM to own pricing, strategy, execution, collaboration with the other departments and whatnot. Yep. We gave you a system for tracking these kinds of things, and let us know what you think about the system, or with all this in place, if it still is not enough to convince executives and whatnot to involve you. The main crux of this podcast, we talked about that pricing is product strategy. And yeah, there might be a skill gap there. Maybe that's a hiring problem. Maybe that's a learning problem. Maybe that's a organizational problem.
These can be overcome.
I feel all of them can be overcome. All these kind of boundaries, you can knock them all down. And then once you knock them all down, you need continuous monitoring and continuous kind of working together to reassess and keep yourself updated and on the edge of the market. This is an interesting one for me because I know a lot of product managers out there are not dealing with pricing.
Right.
You should be dealing with pricing. I think that was my takeaway out of this podcast. And maybe we've given you some tactics to kind of get your foot in the door, because once your foot is in the door, much like that VP of strategic operations and special kids' birthday parties or whatever I was talking about, you can stay there a while, stretch out, lay on the couch, put your feet up.
That's right. And despite all of those things, if you still don't get any traction or headway, keep that resume updated.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like and subscribe to the podcast.
Then update your resume.
You definitely should do both of those things.
Yes.
In whatever order you want.